Good morning, everyone. Glad you're here. Be glad to get past this one. I'm kidding. I'm really not. I don't mind talking about it. It's something we need to talk about, isn't it? So, we're going to talk about knowing your passenger, and this is a session on sexual intimacy in marriage, which is an important topic. And just have to tell you, about 10, maybe more, 10 years ago, I was asked to speak at Focal Point, which is a preacher's workshop, not just for preachers, down in San Marcos, Texas, close to where I'm from. And I was assigned the topic. The name of it was From the Living Room to the Bedroom, Sexual Intimacy in Marriage. And I thought, what in the world is this? From the living room to the bedroom? Not real sure how to take that. And so I was talking to John about it, showed him my topic, said, well, I don't even know where to start with this. And he said, well, I don't know where you're going to start with it either, but I'd be glad to help you with the research. I always have to laugh about that when I think back on that. But we're going to talk about knowing your passenger. And you probably know that in Scripture, knowing, a man knowing his wife, that's a euphemism for the sexual relationship. And that's in the sense of what we call sexual intimacy. Adam knew his wife. Or Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife. Cain knew his wife. So we know that this is talking about the sexual relationship. As far as the word intimacy, there are very few uses of that word. Of course, it's an English word, and Hebrew and Greek are found in the Bible. But there's very few uses of that word intimate or intimacy in Scripture. And the New American Standard uses that word in the sense of friendship, like close friends or having a kinship with someone. And it comes from a Latin word that is intimus, meaning inmost or innermost. In our definition of intimacy today, the way that we use it is belonging to or characterizing one's deepest nature, marked by very close association, contact, or familiarity of a very personal or private nature. So intimacy, even in the broader sense of friendship, is still very rare and precious. Think about this. How many intimate friends do you have? Just friends, girlfriends, women friends. A lot of us may have a lot of friends, but do you have intimate friends? How many intimate friends do you have? It's something that's very rare, and it's very precious, and it's something that we should value. But going back to the topic of sexual intimacy, I loved Eric Elder had in a book, he said, this is what he said about intimacy. He defined it as into me see. And I thought that's really good because we're inviting someone to know us, the innermost side of us. And really, when you think about it, true intimacy is not achieved without our permission. True intimacy is not achieved without our permission, without inviting someone into our heart, without inviting them to know our deepest feelings. So it is a very rare and precious thing. What does the Bible say about marriage and the husband and wife relationship? There are several different passages that we can look to, and this is not an exhaustive list, but Ephesians 5, 22 and 23, I know that we know that one. It's that we're to be subject to our husbands in all things. Genesis 2:24 talks about how a man shall leave his father and mother, and he will become one flesh with his wife. And that goes all the way back to creation. Have you ever thought about Adam and Eve did not have parents when God said this? And God, he had this in mind from the very beginning, even before he created male and female. 1 Peter 3:7 talks about how a husband should live with his wife in an understanding way, showing honor to her as the weaker vessel, since they're heirs with you of the grace of life. So he is to know us. And we have to invite him in. We have to invite him to intimacy. So knowing each other, and it's, it needs to go both ways. It's not just for him to know her, but we need to know him as well. Then more directly related to the sexual intimacy, the sexual relationship, Genesis 1:28 talks about being fruitful and multiplying. Then Proverbs 5:15 through 19. Drink water from your own cistern, flowing from your own well. Let them, the springs, be yours alone. And then in verse 19 it says, be exhilarated. If you turn and look at that, those of you who have, I'm pretty sure that came from the New American Standard, but it may be the ESV. What does your Proverbs 5:19 say? be exhilarated with her love. What are some other translations out there that say, besides exhilarated? Proverbs 5:19. Anybody have anything different than
Enraptured.
enraptured? I like that one. What version is that?
New King James.
New King James.
Intoxicated.
I'm sorry?
Mine says intoxicated.
Intoxicated. Any others?
Captivated.
Captivated. I love all of the different words used to encapsulate how he should feel about our love. Be literally intoxicated. Stagger. I heard this the first time Kathy talking about it. To stagger with her love. And then in Song of Solomon 4:9, if you just turn over a few pages, here's another one that will give you some different words. Be captivated. You have captivated my heart. One of them says, you have made my heart beat faster. What are some other translations that say in Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 9?
Ravished my heart.
You have ravished my heart with one look of your eyes, right? You have another translation? Something besides captivated or ravished? It's a pretty cool relationship, isn't it? To know that we can have that effect on our husbands. We want to have that effect on him. Song of Solomon 7:10 says that I'm my beloved's and his desire is for me. It's very private, isn't it? Hebrews 13:4, marriage is to be held in honor among all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later in this lesson. I always read this when I was younger, and I was pretty much taught this, that anything goes in the marriage bed. And I think that that's fairly true, but when you look at the way that the verse is constructed, the marriage bed is to be undefiled. And some other translations is to be kept undefiled. So it's an intentional thing of keeping your marriage bed pure. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the lesson, because I think that is a very interesting thing to think about. 1 Corinthians 7:1-5. Each man is to have his own wife, each woman her own husband. We have authority over one another's bodies. We take care of each other's sexual needs because God created us to have those sexual needs. They change and they morph over time in our relationship, and as we age, they change, but we still have them. So, I want to say from the very beginning that I welcome discussion. I should not have to be the only one that is bearing my soul, and I will try not to be too bearing, too personal, but, this is my only concept of this is from my own relationship. So, like I said, I'm not going to get too private, but I do like to have some discussion here. So what are my thoughts about intimacy? First of all, I think that sexual intimacy should be and is a sanctuary. So here's an area I'd like to have your input. What when you think of the word sanctuary, what does it make you think of? You can describe it or use a word. What is a sanctuary to you? Safe place. What else?
Place of worship.
A place of worship. Okay.
Peaceful.
Peaceful. I like that.
Rest.
Rest. Okay. What other words would you use? What's a synonym for sanctuary?
Sacrament.
Sacrament. But thinking of it more along the lines of a relationship, I think of the word haven. And this this looks a little bit like Gilligan's Island here, and maybe that's not the best. When you're preparing a lesson on something like this, you have to be careful what you search for in your Google. So I was kind of hurting for some of the images. I couldn't really come up with exactly what is a sanctuary to me, but like a private island with a little bungalow, wouldn't that be cool? As long as it's not in the middle of hurricane season, that'd be great. But I thought about these words: haven, a harbor, because in a harbor you're protected. An oasis, a shelter, a retreat, a hideaway. It's safety, it's protection. And I think about this sanctuary being a place where we can turn our minds off to any other issue for however long, and we can just focus on each other. We can imagine that there's nothing else and no one else but the two of us. And doesn't that sound like a great place to be? I think, if we're honest with ourselves, if we're in a place in our marriage where we want to have that sanctuary with each other, what a beautiful thing to imagine, is having this sanctuary, this little oasis, this haven, where it's just the two of us, and we can block out all other interruptions, whether it be just worldly things that are going on or family issues, just a haven, a sanctuary. This sanctuary should be a place of knowing the mind and the heart and the inner thoughts of your best friend. It's so different from your girlfriends. You know, we have such good friends, but this relationship with our husband is so different, and I'm so thankful for that. The sexual intimacy is spiritual superglue. I've heard it described that way. It's spiritual superglue. This relationship is deeper and more intimate than that we have with our friends and with our family. And I'm just going to be honest with you here. When I was a teenager, maybe even a little bit older than a teenager, I imagined that by about 40 years old, you're done with that. There's no, you're kind of done with the sexual relationship, and it's, because you have these, you're flabby. You have these things that are saggy and chubby, and you're old, and you just don't have that same feeling anymore. I just didn't have any idea. As a teenager, I had no idea what love really was. And I think it begins one way. Those of you who have been married for longer, and you can speak more than I can about this. It starts out when you're very physically attracted, and it grows into something richer and deeper and so much more. The sexual relationship is that. I wrote this down a number of years ago, but this sanctuary is a place of trust where we aren't afraid to lay ourselves bare in all ways because of love, and not necessarily physical attraction, although that's there, but because of love. It's not just about physical feelings, it's about a heart-to-heart emotional connection and communication. Physical feelings are the byproduct of that. It's about building one person out of two. And that love is what draws you together. Desiring one another, it's not just physical, but emotional and mental and spiritual. And it results from the deepest love and affection, tied together with memories and shared experiences and resolved hurts and tough experiences and friendship and laughter. And I can look into your eyes and see the same thing there that I feel in my heart for you. It's you and me against the world, and God is here blessing us. I would encourage you to take time to write down what your definition of intimacy is and how you feel about it, and share that with your husband. And maybe it's not where you want it to be. And often, I wrote down here, it takes time and effort and forgiveness and love, honesty and willingness. It takes a lot of work to be truly intimate with your husband, and not just in a sexual way. There's sex on the one hand, and then there's intimacy on the other. And when they connect, it's the best. So when I look back on this, and I would tell the younger me that no, sexual intimacy is not over when you have stretch marks or whatever, flab, extra pounds, gray hair, but it can be better, and it can be deeper and richer and fuller and more full of joy because of all of those things that we talked about, those experiences of life. So I'd like to encourage you to keep focusing on your marriage, to maintain that closeness and to keep growing together in all ways, whether it's spiritually, physically, taking hikes together, playing in different games, and just doing things, making memories together. Because, not just because, but the byproduct is it will enhance your sexual relationship. And realize that sexual intimacy is from God. God gave it to us. It's sacred and holy, and it's created and gifted by God. Think about it, it's not just given by God, but it's a gift. Something that He created for that express purpose, for husband and wife to enjoy it together. And with His blessing and involvement, everything about marriage can be better and better. So not only is sexual intimacy a sanctuary, it is also being emotionally dependent on one another. So I want to ask you, how does that make you feel? For me to see those words there on the screen, sexual intimacy is being emotionally dependent on one another. You can be honest, how does it make you feel? Nobody wants to talk.
Read it and I think of weakness.
Yeah, weakness. She said, I read it and I think of weakness, which is what I kind of think when I look at it sometimes. What else? Anybody else? How do you feel? that sometimes it makes you feel like a burden. Yeah, to be
Vulnerable.
dependent, makes you feel vulnerable. Okay, what else? Why vulnerable? I don't know who said that back there.
Because it's, you put yourself out there, and you don't know how they're gonna accept it, you don't know what they're gonna get back. It's just,
Because you're putting yourself out there and you don't know what you're gonna get back.
Fearful of rejection.
Fearful of rejection, yeah. So we're giving this emotional dependence to them, but we're not sure what's gonna come back sometimes, right? Anybody else have anything to add to that? It's kind of countercultural, isn't it, to think about being emotionally dependent. In fact, I've heard a lot of people say, I raise my children to be independent. And there's some good things about that. There's some good things about being independent and not having to have certain things from someone else. But God created husband and wife to be emotionally dependent on one another. And that's not a bad thing. We're not part of culture. We're Christians. We are Christians and we're to be different. Husbands and wives are emotionally dependent on one another, and we share this mutual dependence. God made us this way, and these passages talk about that. Genesis 2:18 says that it's not good that man should be alone. I'll make a helper fit for him. So we were made for our husbands. He was made for us. Ecclesiastes 4:9 says that two are better than one. And it goes on to say, if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, and woe to him who's alone when he falls. He doesn't have someone to lift him up. So we have one another to help one another. When one of us is strong, is this true of your marriage? It seems like when I'm having a weak day and I'm grumpy about something and complaining about something, John will be cheerful and say, I think maybe you're looking at it the wrong way. He's nice about it. But he'll say, let's think about it this way, and vice versa. Sometimes when he's having a day like that, I'm the one who will say, well, maybe you're looking at this wrong. So I think it kind of is tied back to some of these passages. Two are better than one. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times. A friend we know is going to stay close through these hardships of life. And then Matthew 19:5, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast. And when you look at what that means, to hold fast, it's to glue together, to bind together, hold fast, to retain, to keep, to seize, to clutch, to cling, to adhere. I mean, that's pretty good imagining, we're stuck together, and that's a good thing. We don't want to come apart. We depend on one another. As in a life-saving situation, we are holding on to one another. So, sexual intimacy is being emotionally dependent on one another. What else is it? Sexual intimacy is and I don't know PowerPoint very well, so some things come up before I'm ready for them to. Just roll with it. Sexual intimacy is a willingness to be vulnerable. I think, and maybe you might disagree, depends on your husband, not everybody's alike, not every man's alike, but I think vulnerability is a little harder for men. Because God wired them and created them to be respected. And again, there's another thing that in our culture, we hear somebody, someone in the world might hear you say that God created them to be respected and women to be loved. And we're like, I need respect too, and he needs love. Yes, that's true. But God created men and women differently, and God created men to need that respect. And some fear being vulnerable. Some men do fear showing vulnerability. And I think truthfully, this is something we need to communicate with our husbands. To me, for him to show vulnerability is very attractive. A lot of that is because I think I'm the only one that he does that to. He'll show some vulnerability, in fact, here. But as far as his innermost and private thoughts, I love knowing that I'm the one that gets to know that side of him, and no one else does. And that's precious to me, to have that relationship that I know that he can be vulnerable to me. It's just more glue to me that binds us together when our husbands show vulnerability. In fact, it really makes me respect him more, that he is willing to show that vulnerability. And I need to tell him that. I need to let him know. And you too. If that's a way that you see he is showing you his vulnerable side, tell him, praise him for that, because he needs to know he's not wasting that vulnerability. I read this in a book once. The only time a guy's guard is completely down is with the woman he loves, so she can pierce his heart like no one else. And we have to be careful not to pierce his heart when he shows that vulnerability. Being vulnerable means that we are not afraid of showing emotions and being willing to listen when the other one needs to share. Why might we be afraid of showing that vulnerability? Why can that be scary?
We've been hurt before when we've been vulnerable.
We've been hurt before when we've been vulnerable. Broken trust, right? You think of other reasons why we're afraid of being vulnerable?
Rejection.
We're afraid of rejection. Maybe some of us just don't like being seen as weak, and vulnerability feels like we're showing weakness. But we've got to be willing to be vulnerable with one another, and that's a big part of intimacy. Think about this for yourself. Do some self-examination. Do you make it easy for him to be vulnerable with you? Sometimes we do, and a lot of times I think we don't. And this is a hard subject, and I see a lot of faces that seem a little conflicted here, and it is a hard subject. So they're dealing with it out there, we're dealing with ourselves in here, and no doubt that they're talking about some of the same things that we're talking about. So sexual intimacy is a willingness to be vulnerable. The next one is sexual intimacy is a deep trust. It is a deep trust. I know that John sees me like no one else sees me. Morning breath, an old, why is it the most comfortable nightgowns are the ugliest ones? And I like those. I like comfortable ones. Maybe, if you've been through childbirth, they've seen that, and that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very private thing. Now, I think everybody's getting a little hot. I think we turned the air down. I'm starting to see it and feel it.
I was wondering myself.
Now, we're talking about this subject and we're all. So, think about, has your husband seen you at your worst? And thinking, physically worst, when you don't look your best, when you aren't feeling your best, maybe you've got a stomach virus, there's all kinds of ways that they've seen us, and yet they see us this way and they still love us. And I know that. I feel it from John. I love him when he has morning breath and all that other stuff. But I think that it's a trust that our secrets are not going to be revealed, right? We're not worried that he's going to tell somebody about some physical limitation we have in the sexual relationship. We're not worried that he's going to go spill the beans on something that we told him intimate. We really should be able to. If you don't have that trust with your husband, you need to talk to him about it. You need to have some discussion about that. But this sexual intimacy is a trust that no one else is going to be involved in this sacred relationship. And for those of you who have husbands who are sort of in the public arena, I know it's having a preacher husband, maybe some of you have a husband that works in the public and maybe in government, something like that, and other people know a lot about him, but especially preachers. I'll just let you in on the secret here. Everybody in the congregation knows his favorite food. Potlucks, they know he likes this, and so they might bring something that he's gonna like. They know what his ties look like. You know when he gets a haircut. You know what his house looks like. You've been inside his home. You know who their friends are. But this sexual intimacy is something that only you share with your husband. That's not something that anyone else knows anything about. And I think that this trust is something that he would not trade for the world. I know that I wouldn't. Sexual intimacy is also a demonstration of love. The sexual relationship is evidence that you love and desire your husband. You can say all day long, I love you. I love you, I love you. You can hear it in your voice even. You can say it when you're not meaning it as much. I love you, yes, I love you. But when they see that look of love in our eyes, that's unmistakable. They can also see the opposite when we do not have that look of love in our eyes. And they feel it. But they gain confidence from having that evidence. Do they see evidence of love in our eyes, in our hugs, in the way that we respond to them, they need evidence. And that the sexual relationship is definitely evidence of our love. That same book that I was talking about a moment ago, I read, intimacy is the clearest way she can say, you are more important to me than anything else in the world. It's a form of communication that speaks more forcefully with less room for interpretation than any other. So you speak through your sexual intimacy. You say things to him in that regard. Intimacy is also it's God's gift designed for husband and wife. It's the sexual relationship that God gifted to husbands and wives. There are many different warnings in the Bible against this relationship when two people are not in a marriage relationship. Hebrews 13:4, we mentioned this a moment ago. Let the marriage bed be undefiled. When I dug into this a little bit more, yes, the marriage bed is anything goes without going deep into that, but that's personal preference goes on in different areas on the marriage bed. But as far as keep it pure. Don't bring other memories, other people, obviously not other people into marriage bed, but don't twist this gift. When you think about sin, probably every sin is something God gave us that's good that the devil has twisted into something that's not good. And that's where this comes in, because I think that probably the devil uses sex more than anything else and has twisted it and made it into something ugly and empty. And people don't recognize it. They don't recognize that it's ugly and empty. They think that it's great. They talk about great sex out there and they know nothing about it. So Hebrews 13:4, let the marriage bed be undefiled. Great sex. As you hear people talk, you might see on the magazines that you pass at the grocery store, Vogue or whatever, Cosmopolitan, all these it'll splash it on the cover. Great sex. Maybe they think it is because it might be a good physical feeling, but it's without the emotional glue that God gave us. It's without that spiritual high that God intended it to be, and the devil uses sex more than anything. And we've come to accept it. I think we've come to accept it with the things that we read, the things that we attend, the movies we see. If we're not careful, we're in acceptance with how the devil is twisting God's gift for husband and wife. Proverbs 5. Turn and look at this. Proverbs 5. Beginning in verse 7, he says, now, O sons, listen to me. Do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others and your years to the merciless. Lest strangers take their fill of your strength and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life you groan when your flesh and body are consumed. And you say, how I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. I didn't listen to the voice of my teachers or incline my ear to my instructors. I'm at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. Think about this with sex in the world and how this is a warning against casual sex. And he goes on and says, drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. And we've already read, be intoxicated always in her love. So don't waste this with some stranger. Don't, and I know in a room like this, there's people that it's not a concern, but we've got to warn other people about this and show what God intended sex to be, and it's not something casual, and it's not something to be shared with anyone that's not our husband. Okay, we're going to talk about some ways that we sabotage. How do we sabotage this gift? But before I give you my list, I would like for you to tell me what are some ways that we sabotage this gift from God. How do we sabotage the sexual relationship? We don't prioritize it. How do we prioritize it? I'll put you on the spot. How do you prioritize it?
Making time for that.
would you have ever thought, maybe as, before you got married and you're looking forward to that relationship, and could you ever have imagined that you would have to make time for it? Because before it was like, okay, have to slow down and stop, but now we have to make time for it. It changes, doesn't it? How else do we maybe sabotage God's gift of the sexual relationship?
Okay, Kevin told me not to say anything, but I have to say. Because it's not really about him. Sometimes I think, our entertainment, you know, and oh my goodness, I'm putting myself out there, vulnerable. Like some of the books that I've read, they're not, you know, then maybe the expectation is not as satisfying as it seems.
Yeah, because of what a book portrays.
Exactly,
Mhm.
and so that,
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Thank you for saying that, because it is, I mean, I think that is a huge problem even for Christian women, is that we read these books that we think are fairly innocent, and it portrays something that's not realistic. And it portrays, all of this wonderful fulfillment in the sexual relationship, and whoever we're reading about's not married.
But
So-
that's all kinds of media, you
Mhm.
know. I'm a therapist and I deal with a lot of sex addicts,
Mhm.
and I had a young man explaining, he had saved himself for marriage, and what he thought he was saving for was not what went down.
Mm,
And so he thought he had done something wrong, or maybe she was doing something, just all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so then you see this tumbleweed start,
mm,
and you think, it's not what the movies.
yeah. I don't think you probably could hear her in the back, but she was talking about how she has counseled people who were told that it's gonna be this way, and it wasn't the way it was, and so it leads to other problems, and so we have to be careful not to have these expectations that we've talked about. How else can we sabotage this?
When we weaponize it.
When we weaponize it, use it, withhold it from our husbands when, as a means to get back at them, or even, as dangling it in front of them. It's weaponizing sex. How else can we sabotage?
I think sometimes when you grow up in the church, you're taught it's bad,
Mhm.
and you don't do it, you don't talk about it, and so then when you get married, you're supposed to flip a switch,
Mhm.
and sometimes the switch doesn't flip,
Yeah,
and then that can cause all kinds of
yeah. I wrote that down too, because I think we sometimes do kind of a bad job of, we're trying to prevent something, and yet we don't go on to explain how beautiful it is after marriage. And, just be honest, if someone has sex before marriage, it can physically feel good, and yet it's empty. It's empty of what God promises, but they don't see that. They're still stuck on the physical feeling part of it. Can you think of other ways that we sabotage it? I was thinking, again about that expectations being premeditated resentments, and speaking of that last night, the date night that he planned, my idea was, there's a restaurant in San Marcos called Palmer's, and it's, quiet and music playing in the background and a nice dinner and the tablecloth and all that, which I don't care as much anymore about that kind of night, but when he said, I'm gonna plan a date night, I was thinking, okay, Palmer's, and he's gonna take me to a play in Wimberley, which is a fun little playhouse, and then we ended up going to Hill's Cafe, and then we went to watch intramural football. So that kind of taught me that if I have an expectation, I need to communicate that expectation. And so, with regard to the sexual relationship, those are really hard to communicate, aren't they? It's hard to communicate what your idea of romantic is, and it's hard to do it. I mean, it's a little easier when the mood is set, but to have just this casual conversation, it's really kind of hard to do. But sometimes we have to make time for those conversations, and to have the right mood or setting to have that conversation is important to think about ahead of time. How are we going to do that? Maybe our idea of romance is just cuddles and just chilling on the couch and little kisses, and his idea is something a whole lot more exciting to him. And there's room for both. but we've got to communicate that, and they have to understand that just because we would like a kiss and a cuddle and not the wild and exciting part doesn't mean we don't love them. It just means that tonight I need this, or before I need this. And again, yes, it is hard to communicate, but we've got to do it. So expectations is something that we can, if we have too high expectations, we can sabotage that relationship. Then what about when we are overly critical and harshly judgmental, otherwise known as nagging? From this same book, men need a place where they can, whether in or out of the bedroom, make their mistakes in peace and not constantly worry that they are one misstep away from being exposed. If we don't realize this, and maybe we are perhaps critical of their mistakes at home, we risk creating a situation that is the opposite of what we want. Now, in simple words, when what we want is to be close, we just want closeness, and they don't do exactly, provide that exactly the way we want it provided, then we get angry, or we get upset, or we get offended, or we just withdraw, and then we end up having the entire opposite of what we wanted in the first place. But it's because of our own behavior. So think about that. When we're overly critical of their attempts, or, we might not even be verbal about it, we might just be, it may be an aura. Do you have an aura that you put off sometimes? I know I do. Then they're afraid of making the next move, and they're afraid of criticism, or they're afraid of judgment. And I think, I've given this lesson before, and I have people that come up to me afterwards and they'll say, "You don't know my husband. He needs me to help him in this area." And I think, maybe they need some constructive, I don't even want to use the word criticism. What they need is communication, kind communication. But you know what? The truth is that you and I, everyone in this room, can make things worse, or we can make them better by the way that we love our husbands and the way that we're kind to them when they maybe make a little mistake. And maybe it's not a mistake, maybe we're the ones with the problem. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm the one that sabotages things a lot of times. So try and see how being kind and loving will get you something so much far better than when we are critical and judgmental. Another thing that kills and sabotages the gift is anger. Nothing kills it faster than anger. Think about it. You cannot be intimate and angry at the same time. You can try, but it's hypocritical, it's shallow, it's empty. You cannot make love, genuine love, when anger is present. Just can't do it. It's not making love when you're angry. So we've got to kill that anger. Anger leads to a vicious cycle, like we talked about last night. We get angry about something. If you're like me, you pout about it, which is so attractive, isn't it? Isn't pouting so attractive? He doesn't want to be around it, so maybe he goes and does something with his buddies, or he goes out to the shed and works on something, or he just does anything to get away from you, and then that makes us angrier, and we pout some more. And then he withdraws, and so here we are. We don't have what we want, which is intimacy, and it's because we have affected our own relationship. I have news for all of us. I am in charge of my own emotions. You are in charge of your own emotions. And we have to intentionally decide that we're going to take charge of the way that we feel. Make up our minds that we're going to overlook a fault. It's our glory. The Bible says it's a glory to overlook a fault. Serve your spouse's weakness. Overlook something that's so, why do we get so upset about things that are so silly? John talked about giving your spouse a gift. Guilt, inferiority, fear, and trauma. It's a big thing. And when they react differently, or we react differently, sometimes we have to think, why am I reacting this way? Am I feeling guilty about something? Am I feeling inferior? Think about those things. Do some self-examination and self-correction. Ephesians 4:26, be angry, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Someone, we were talking about this last night. We can't go to bed unless we hammer this out. Well, the Bible says don't let the sun go down on your anger. Sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm setting my anger aside. We have to go to bed. We have to get some sleep because it's just getting worse, because we're tired and we're saying things we don't mean. Again, say I love you. We'll resolve this later. We're not going to bed angry. We're going to bed to sleep, and we're going to bed knowing that we're gonna resolve it later. So don't automatically assume that you have to hammer everything out before you go to sleep. Proverbs 12:16. A fool's anger is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. So if you're wise, you're gonna ignore some of those insults, or you're not gonna take them as an insult at all. So, again, expectations, judgment, and criticism, anger sabotages the relationship. Another one is distraction and interruptions. We have lots of computers and iPhones and iPads and earphones. One of my things that I like to do is Candy Crush. I'll just admit it, I like to play Candy Crush, and before bed, so sometimes that gets in the way. Books, I like to read, and maybe I'm in the middle of a story, and that's hard to put it down. Maybe there's some Fox News junkies out there, like my husband, who, that is not in the bedroom. No news in the bedroom. Put them down, put them away. And if you're in the season of life with kids, put a lock on the door and insist on privacy at some points, because your husband needs to come for your kids. I know that's maybe not a popular thing to think about, but your husband comes before your children. They're gonna be okay. In fact, they need to know that their mom and dad love each other, and they need that security, and it'll be worth it. Okay, and then another one. Boy, I need to hurry up. Hormones. Hormones, that's a tough one. And it's even worse when they look at you with that. It's at that time of the month again. And then you really want to sock them, right? Because don't talk about my hormones. How can they understand our mood and emotion when we can't even understand it? So instead of throwing a shoe, just acknowledge. We don't have to say anything like, yes, it is that time of the month. But just say, I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm reacting this way. I'll be better in a few days, or tonight. I'll work on being better tonight. So just apologize. Now, how can we build intimacy? Those were the sabotages. Now, how do we build intimacy? And we need to hurry through this. How do we build? Did you ever hear the story about how the wife complained about how her husband never was glad to see her when he walked in the door after work? And they'd walk in and she might say, hey, or she might say, I'm in the kitchen, or whatever. Or maybe she's grumpy and doesn't say anything. But the dog would always run to the door and jump up and down and bark and yip and yap, and they're so happy and just lick all over him. And I'm not going to do that. But we had this conversation about, be happy to see them and express, maybe wait for them at the door. And that does not feel natural. And it seems like, leave it to Beaver and all that. But why is that a bad thing? Why is it a bad thing? Be countercultural. Be a Christian. Not be worried about what culture says. Greet him at the door. So basic kindness and encouragement and even a sense of humor is helpful for building intimacy. Bring him a coffee. Be the first to give him a hug. Text him. Know his favorites. Thank him for dinner. I fall out of that because I figure our money comes from the same bank account, so thank me for dinner. Thank myself. No, thank him for taking you to dinner, for taking care of you, for hugging you. You know what he likes, and pay attention to that. It's just basic. And again, if you're out there thinking, he doesn't do this for me. Well, Jesus said there's this golden rule to treat others the way we want to be treated. So there's that. And then again, Romans 12, verse 10. We are one body, we are one flesh. Go first and lead the way. You model the behavior you would like to see from your husband. 1 John 4:19, we love God because he first loved us. If we show our husbands this love, he's going to return that love. And it may take some time and effort, but just try it. Show love to him. The next thing is to know and learn his love language. And I think that John will probably talk about this. Do all of you know what your love language is? Have you taken that little quiz? It's really interesting. There are 5 love languages. There's probably more, but you can pretty much summarize that everyone has one of these top of 5 love languages. One is words of affirmation, which is unsolicited compliments, hearing I love you, being kind and hearing kind and encouraging words. The next one is physical touch, which is not all about the bedroom. That's hugs, pats on the back, physical presence, a sense of security, just a touch in the car. Maybe you just put your hand on the back of his neck while he's driving, holding hands. Touch is what lets them know that you love them. Then there's acts of service. And that's when you're easing the burden of their responsibility. You find ways to serve them. Maybe you say something like, I see how much you've got going on and I'm gonna help you. I see you and your needs. There's quality time. There's no devices. This is my love language, my top love language. Full undivided attention. Having a quality conversation and doing things together. There's no other people around. And then there's receiving gifts. And that sounds materialistic, but it's not. There's just some people that's the language that they speak. Knowing that you're thought of behind the gift. So, words of affirmation. I've got to tell you a little story, and he's telling this in there too. Did any of you go to the Smoky Mountain marriage retreat? I guess it was last year. Joe and Aaron Wells were there. So this will be news to you. So Joe set up 3 trays at the front of the stage, and they were during the talk about the sexual relationship. One of the trays had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The next one had like your typical dinner plate and, you know, a nice meal, but just your typical nice meal that you serve for supper. And then the last one had china and, you know, candles and a very, very nice meal. And I was not there, so I'm getting kind of the short story from Erin. She told me that Joe said sometimes you just need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because that's all you have time for, but it's filling and it's good and it tastes good and we like it. So sometimes you just need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Other times you have time for a nicer meal. And then sometimes there's the really fancy dinner. So, personal here, but I just sent John a text one day and said, last night was not PB&J. And he knew what I meant. And he came home from work really happy that day. I'm sorry to give you TMI, but I'm telling you this because it gives you a way of communicating without saying something embarrassing. You know, maybe you like to say things that are, you know, very straightforward, but be careful because sometimes they put their screens up on the PowerPoint and other people see them. So I'm very, very careful about what I text. But nobody would have known except unless now you know what that means. So my point of that is that was a word of affirmation for him. And it was a fun and a playful and a silly thing, but he knew what I meant and he liked it. So you can communicate that way. Give him some words of affirmation. Know what his love language is and speak it to him. You know, when we try to speak another language to someone else, it's frustrating because they don't understand it. But when we learn their language, you know, when we are in Israel, they're speaking Hebrew, which is nothing like English. You can't look at a can of green beans unless it has a picture on it, because the Hebrew language looks nothing like the English language. It's frustrating. We can't communicate that way. But if we learn that and we speak it to them and they learn ours and speak it to us, then the communication flows much freer. So again, don't be frustrated if he's not speaking it. You go first and lead the way. Learn his language and speak it. The next one, this was a tough one. Make an effort to take care of ourselves physically. In that same book that I've been talking about, there's a chapter on how we look physically. And at the very beginning of that chapter, it said, before you read this chapter, pray first. And I have to admit, when I first read it, I just skipped it. I didn't want to know about that. But then when I looked back at the book, I had notes and folded down pages and marked up other pages, and that chapter was left alone because I didn't really want to know. And I'm not talking about shrink down to your pre-pregnancy or your high school size. I'm just talking about letting him know that you care what you look like to him, that you're not always gonna, sweats and a t-shirt are great, but not every day, not 24/7. Dress up for him sometimes, or just know what he likes, know that he likes to see. John has told me, I just like when you look like a woman. It doesn't matter if it's, a dress and hose and all that. I don't do hose anymore, but he just wants me to look like a woman. Brush our hair, brush our teeth. At some points in life, it's harder than others, but I think it's something that we can do. Think about how we look and how we are to him, and so make an effort to take care of ourselves physically. And then the very, very, very best way to grow together is, and to enhance your intimacy, is to grow together spiritually. You might be surprised by that. H. Norman Wright had a book on Christian counseling, and he said, a Christian marriage involves more than the blending of two people. It also includes a third person, Jesus Christ, who gives meaning, guidance, and direction to the relationship. When he presides in the marriage, then and only then is it a Christian marriage. So this intimacy grows when we share a common goal. 1 Peter 3:7, we've already talked about it. Husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. They are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers are not hindered. It's a very serious thing. Again, if you're thinking to yourself, he needs to grow, he needs to be the spiritual leader, you're right, he needs to be the spiritual leader. But you, again, go first and lead the way. When you grow spiritually, you grow to be more like Christ, and that enhances every other area of your life, including the sexual relationship. Grow spiritually. Read scripture together. Read to him from the Bible. Just do things that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, and it will benefit you. It has drawn us closer. When we're growing spiritually together, our attitudes and our minds are transformed. You know, the Bible is powerful. It's powerful. There's a lot of power in this Word of God. And if we're not relying on it in our marriages, even for the sexual relationship, we are cheating ourselves. Johnny Ramsey took part in our marriage ceremony. Some of you may have known him 39 years ago. And he said, I've never forgotten this, that marriage is the vestibule of heaven, a foretaste of glory divine. The vestibule is what is right before you go into where you sit and listen, the auditorium. Marriage is the vestibule of heaven. It can be. And if it's not for you, ask for help. Find someone to help you. Find a mentor and talk to them about it. Communicate with your husband. Find a counselor if you need to. There is no shame in admitting that you need some help, because we all do from time to time. But grow together and know that marriage can be the vestibule of heaven. Let's pray before we end this session. Father, thank you so much for these women. I thank you for their willingness to spend their weekend talking about their marriages, and maybe in some uncomfortable ways, thinking about things that are hard to talk about. But God, I pray that you will bless each of these women and their husbands, or if they're not married, their future husbands, and those of us who have influence on others. God, just please bless us with wisdom, with happiness, with knowing your word and spending time in your word, and knowing how much that will enhance our relationship. God, I pray that you will just bless each marriage that's represented here, and help us to help one another get to heaven. Help us to lean on one another. Help us to grow in our intimacy, God. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for creating something that draws us together and holds us together. And God, help us to fight against the devil who wants to twist that gift and make it into something that it's not. Help us to recognize when that's happening and to fight against it. God, help us to be brave and courageous, to go first and lead the way in these areas that are so important, that can enhance our happiness on earth and help us get to heaven. Father, I just pray that you'll bless each of these women in such a special way, and continue with us as we grow and study today. Thank you again in Jesus' name. Amen.